Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're really tackling one of the most fundamental questions in psychology. What is the architecture of adult life?
Is a huge question.
It is, right?
Right.
Because we spend so much time on, the drama of childhood, the chaos of adolescence, but what about all the decades that come after?
Exactly. What happens after the so-called formative years are over? What kind of frameworks can help us understand who we actually become?
And how we change, and what does a successful, mature life even look like?
Well, that's a necessary shift in focus because development doesn't just stop at 18. We're moving past those early maps and we're asking, what's the destination? And how do we even navigate the terrain?
And the source material we're looking at today is, I think, exceptional because it pulls from two really different but complementary fields of knowledge.
It really does.
On one hand, you've got the grand sort of historical vision, the classic developmental stage theories that try to map out this universal human path. But then we immediately ground that in the, let's call it the hard data of contemporary personality psychology, the actual science of who we are at our core.
That's a perfect way to put it. And so the mission for this deep dive is to really distill what the major psychological thinkers said about our adult trajectory, and then see how our core personality traits evolve over that time.
And how we meet those two huge adult challenges.
The two defining challenges, the need for deep connection, what we'll call intimacy, and that drive for a meaningful contribution, which is generativity.
That dual mandate right there. Intimacy and generativity, that's the thread that's going to run through everything we talk about today. It's really a shortcut to understanding both the structure and the substance of maturity.
It is.
So let's jump in. Let's look at those foundational maps first.
If we're going to talk about adult life stages, there's really only one place to start. And that's with the architect of the whole lifespan model, Erikson.
Right. Most people, they're familiar with Erikson's 8 stages, especially the early ones: trust versus mistrust, autonomy, and of course the big one, the identity crisis of adolescence. But what did he actually lay out for the years that come after that crucial identity formation?
Well, Erikson originally proposed 8 sequential stages that cover the entire lifespan. And what's really important is that 3 of those stages are specifically for the decades after adolescence.
So from early adulthood all the way through old age.
Exactly. And those 3 are, as you said before, the massive challenges that define our journey.
Okay, so let's walk through them.
Precisely. They are sequential, though. We'll add a little nuance to that in a moment. But first, in early adulthood, we face intimacy versus isolation.
This is about finding a partner.
It's the challenge of finding a deep, committed connection. Often it's romantic, sure, but not exclusively. And the risk is avoiding that trap of deep, profound loneliness. If you navigate this successfully, you develop the virtue of love.
Okay, so then moving into the middle years, the focus kind of zooms out from just the individual or the couple to the collective.
That brings us to the second adult stage, generativity versus stagnation. This is really the phase of contribution. It's that drive to create or to nurture things that will outlast you as an individual.
So this could be raising kids,
Raising children, mentoring younger colleagues, creating art, building a business. It's about finding a way to care for and guide the next generation. The negative outcome here is stagnation, a kind of self-centered disinterest in contributing at all.
and then the final stop on this tour, late adulthood.
That's when we confront integrity versus despair. You've lived a life and now you look back and you assess its value. The task is to achieve a sense of wholeness, of fulfillment, or else fall into despair and regret over what you missed, the failures.
And if you achieve integrity, the virtue is wisdom.
The virtue is wisdom.
That sequence feels so logical. Find your footing, find a partner, build your contribution, and then you reflect. But here's where the analysis gets really interesting, and where our sources point out a huge revision to that original map. Erikson didn't think the road was always straight, did he?
He did not. And this is the aha moment that so many people miss because it just fundamentally redefines what adult development is. Later in his life, Erikson realized the stages weren't. They weren't these linear steps that once you complete them, they're locked away forever.
So what does that look like in practice? Which stages can bubble back up?
He really emphasized that adults of many ages can still be grappling with earlier challenges. Specifically, he pointed to the 5th stage, the stage of adolescence identity versus role confusion.
So you could be 45 and still be figuring out who you are.
Think about it. The 45-year-old who suddenly leaves a stable career, gets a divorce, sells the house to go travel. That person isn't necessarily failing at generativity. They're cycling back to resolve an identity crisis that maybe they just deferred for decades.
That reframes the whole midlife crisis idea. It's less of a crisis and more of a developmentally normal, if maybe disruptive, attempt to revisit that foundational map.
It is.
But why would that identity stage come back in middle age? Wasn't it supposed to be resolved when you were a teenager?
Well, the world is constantly shifting. An identity you forge at age 20 might feel, I don't know, obsolete by the time you're 40.
True.
Technological disruption, the death of a parent, kids leaving home, a partnership ending, any of these can force this huge existential reevaluation. The source material really emphasizes that adult life often demands that we redefine who we are before we can successfully continue with what we contribute.
So if you find yourself working through your sense of self in your 40s or 50s, you're not stuck. You're just looping back to identity, which Erikson, in his wisdom, he recognized was a necessary ongoing challenge.
It is. It really raises the question, does development ever truly finish if we could just cycle back to any unresolved crisis?
Yeah, that's a big question.
It implies that maturity is less about achieving some fixed state and more about just maintaining the flexibility to re-engage with these foundational crises when life demands it. The image of a figure-8 loop is probably more accurate than a straight staircase.
I like that. Okay, fascinating. Now, let's look at a different grand tour, one that's focused more on motivation and needs instead of these psychosocial crises. I'm talking about Abraham Maslow's hierarchy.
Right. Maslow's work, which he formalized back in 1954, described 5 sequential stages. And it's famously visualized as that pyramid of needs. It's a very elegant system.
And the fundamental rule of Maslow's system is you have to secure the base before you can climb the pyramid.
Exactly. You have to satisfy the 4 what he called deficiency needs: physiological, safety, love, and belonging and esteem before the individual is ready for that 5th and final step: growth motivation or self-actualization.
But I have to push back on that a little. Just in the 21st century, I mean, you look at the extreme financial and social volatility so many young adults face now. Student debt, unstable housing, political uncertainty. Can we really say they've secured safety and physiological needs enough to consistently pursue intimacy or self-actualization?
That is the fundamental critique of applying a mid-20th century model to modern life. It's a great point.
Doesn't modern life just scramble Maslow's pyramid?
It does. I mean, the ideal remains sequential, but the reality is it's messy. Many people are forced to pursue belonging and esteem, often online or in non-traditional communities, even while their basic safety needs feel really fragile.
But the goal, the striving, that's still there.
The striving toward the summit, self-actualization, that desire to achieve your full unique potential, that remained Maslow's core focus for decades.
And just like Erikson, Maslow's actually reassessed his final level later in his life, didn't he? He suggested a summit beyond self-actualization.
Yes, he did. He suggested a 6th, often overlooked level that he called self-transcendence. And this is where the focus moves entirely beyond the ego, beyond the self, toward meaning outside of your own existence.
So it's not about personal achievement anymore.
Not at all. It's about contributing to the greater good, spiritual realization, finding meaning in selfless service.
So if self-actualization is becoming the best me I can be, self-transcendence is kind of about dissolving the me into something larger.
That's a perfect way to describe it. It's the ultimate altruism. And Maslow's research suggested that this level, it's often not attained until late in life. It requires perspective, detachment from ego-driven needs, a deep understanding of your place in the cosmic or communal order. It's really hard to be selfless if you're still scrambling for esteem.
That connects so beautifully with Erikson's generativity, but it's framed more through the lens of individual spiritual growth. Both of these foundational thinkers, they really agreed that adult life is continuously evolving, demanding adaptation right up until the very end. Yeah. Okay, so we've mapped the big theoretical journey. Now let's zoom in on the internal reality, the actual building blocks of the self, which is personality. We're shifting from these broad stages to a much more microscopic view of character.
And this is where contemporary psychology gives us a much more granular view. While personality is incredibly complex, I mean, psychologists would say each person has hundreds of unique traits, They agree that the core components can be captured pretty effectively by the Big Five, or ocean theory.
And this framework, it's achieved this remarkable universality across different cultures. It's really the definitive way personality is measured today. So let's make sure we detail what each of these elements means, because these traits are going to dictate how we navigate the rest of adult life.
Absolutely. The Big Five really acts as our internal blueprint. So you have O for openness.
Okay.
This reflects your intellectual curiosity, your imagination, a willingness to try new things, and engage with complex ideas. High openness often correlates with creativity.
And low openness would be a preference for routine, the familiar.
Exactly. Then you have C for conscientiousness. This is about being organized, disciplined, goal-oriented, responsible. It's a really powerful predictor of career success and academic achievement.
So low conscientiousness would be disorganization, impulsivity.
Then E for extroversion. This covers sociality, assertiveness, enthusiasm. Extroverts, they gain energy from being around people, while introverts need solitude to recharge.
Right.
A is for agreeableness. This describes kindness, cooperation, empathy, being easygoing. High agreeableness often means you avoid confrontation.
While low agreeableness might be more skeptical or competitive.
Precisely. And finally, N for neuroticism. This is the degree of emotional instability. It involves anxiety, moodiness, a tendency toward negative emotions. Low neuroticism, on the other hand, is marked by emotional resilience and stability.
And what's so fascinating is that these traits aren't just, learned behaviors. There's a really strong hypothesis that they have a distinct biological and neurological basis.
Right, that they are enduring aspects of our biological wiring. The source material highlights the intense effort scientists have made to find correlations between these traits and observable brain activity. For example, a lot of research looks at specific brain regions tied to planning and emotion.
And you mentioned visualizing that activity, often shown as red in brain scans. Can you give us a concrete example of that connection?
Certainly. Take conscientiousness. High conscientiousness, which involves planning and impulse control, is often correlated with increased gray matter volume and higher activity in the prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive control center.
Okay, that makes sense.
And conversely, neuroticism, that emotional reactivity trait, often shows correlations with activity in the amygdala, which is the brain region that's centrally involved in processing fear and other emotional responses.
So the stability of these traits isn't just behavioral, it's physically rooted in the brain. But how stable are they really? I mean, does our personality blueprint actually change, or does it just mature?
The general trajectory is described as positive, which means personality traits do evolve, and typically for the better. As we mature, we generally see an increase in conscientiousness and agreeableness.
So we become more reliable and nicer people.
We become more reliable and nicer people, yes. And at the same time, neuroticism tends to decrease, meaning we become more emotionally stable and resilient.
That's a good news story for everyone, really. We get more solid, more stable, more cooperative with age. Is there a typical timeline for this, or does it happen just kind of uniformly through adulthood?
It's not uniform at all. The research suggests personality change is actually more likely to happen either early or late in life. The period of midlife, say your 30s through early 50s, tends to be a time of relative stability where our traits kind of consolidate.
So the early years are dynamic because you're exploring roles, and the late years are dynamic because of big life transitions like retirement or illness.
Exactly. And it's maybe that stability of the middle years that allows us to focus on generativity because we're not constantly dealing with all this internal flux.
But this stable blueprint, it still has to interact with a world that's constantly shifting.
Absolutely. The cultural context interacts significantly with personality.
Yeah.
I mean, think about how societal expectations around, say, aggression or introversion shape how those traits get expressed. The most crucial finding here, though, is the link to satisfaction. Happiness is highly correlated with a good match between your personality traits and your social context.
That correlation is everything. If you're an extreme extrovert and you take a job that requires 2 years of solitary research in a remote cabin, your high extroversion isn't working for you, it's working against you.
Exactly. It's causing strain and unhappiness. The fit matters far more than the absolute score on any one trait. Our task in adulthood, then, is not necessarily to change our personality, but to arrange our external life, our relationships, our work, our environment, to optimally express the personality we already have.
Which brings us directly to that first great external challenge, connection. Let's transition back to Erikson's first major adult stage, intimacy versus isolation. How does that internal blueprint we just discussed, our ocean profile, drive the way we form deep, committed connections?
Well, for centuries, the main pathway to resolving intimacy versus isolation was almost exclusively marriage.
Right.
The global trend today is unequivocally toward the postponement of marriage. People are waiting longer or choosing to forego it altogether, often for financial or educational reasons.
And the sources make a strong case for why societies encourage marriage, stable structures, consistent workforce, and so on. But for
Okay.
the individual, why is a satisfying, committed partnership so beneficial?
The research shows this clear cumulative benefit. A satisfying long-term commitment profoundly improves health, wealth, and happiness. And this isn't just abstract, it's measurable. In terms of health, partners often monitor each other's health, ensuring lifestyle accountability and early intervention. Financially, it allows for shared resource management. And emotionally, it provides a stable anchor, which is crucial for regulating stress and mood.
But, and this is a big but, we have to stress that not all marriages give you these benefits. The experience is highly variable.
That is the essential nuance. Marital happiness levels are changing dramatically based on income, education, culture, cohort. Today, marriage is often seen as a capstone, something you achieve after you've achieved individual success, rather than a cornerstone you build your life upon.
And that shift has really changed expectations and satisfaction levels.
It has. And given that postponement, we're seeing a much wider spectrum of committed partnership that satisfies that need for intimacy.
Right.
Cohabitation rates are soaring across all adult ages. It's moving from a marginal arrangement to a very common life choice. And we're also seeing a rise in LAT, or living apart together.
Where committed partners keep separate residences.
Exactly. Often to preserve financial independence or accommodate different professional lives.
So it's not about proximity anymore, it's about sustained commitment.
Precisely. Long-term committed partnership, regardless of its legal status, is the enduring link to lifelong health and happiness. And the shifting nature of these partnerships has radically altered family structures. We talked about the empty nest myth earlier.
The idea that parents struggle when kids leave.
Right, which is becoming outdated because the kids often don't leave, or they come back. The increasing rates of boomerang children, adult children returning home, usually for financial reasons, means that parent-child intimacy link stays active, sometimes indefinitely.
And that requires a huge renegotiation of roles for everyone involved.
Oh, a profound one.
Let's talk about how the intimacy imperative applies to LGBTQ+ partnerships. Do those universal ideas of relationship health hold true there?
Fundamentally, yes. The core ingredients for sustained emotional well-being are the same: communication, faithfulness, mutual support. Research shows the problems faced by gay and lesbian partners, disagreements over money, chores, communication, are virtually identical to those in heterosexual couples.
But the external pressures often add a layer of stress that's unique to them.
That's the key distinction. While the internal dynamics are similar, external factors like a lack of family acceptance, social discrimination, historical legal hurdles, they introduce additional structural conflict that has to be navigated.
And navigating that successfully must reinforce the bond.
It does. Their emotional well-being tends to increase over time, reinforcing their bond against that external strain.
Okay, now let's turn to the necessary end of some relationships, separation and divorce. The research is clear that while it's painful, it's not always a negative outcome.
We have to hold two truths at once here. While divorce is destructive on many levels, about 1/3 of U.S. divorces end in abusive or seriously destructive relationship. In those cases, the divorce usually benefits at least one spouse, and crucially often the children, by removing them from chronic conflict.
But for the majority, the negative fallout is immense.
It is. Divorce invariably reduces household income, it severs friendships because social circles often dissolve or choose sides, and it weakens broader family ties. It's a rupture in the entire social convoy.
And there's a serious warning in the source material about children in these situations.
A very severe caution. While confiding heavily in children about the emotional pain of the divorce might feel cathartic for the adult, the data shows it does not benefit the children. They need stability and support, not the burden of adult problems.
That's a powerful warning. And looking at the broader context of support, intimacy isn't just about romantic partners. It's sustained by that wider network of people who support us.
That network is what psychologists call the social convoy. It's a beautifully apt metaphor. The convoy is the collective of family, friends, acquaintances, even strangers who move through life with a person, providing a buffer against isolation.
And who are the most crucial non-family members of that convoy?
Friends. They provide a unique layer of support. While family offers emotional comfort, friends often provide the most practical help and the most useful objective advice during a serious problem. And interestingly, the research notes some of the strongest friendships are those forged through shared problems.
Mutual challenges creating a deep, enduring bond.
Exactly.
Moving back to family, even as adults, our childhood history has this continuous, powerful impact.
It does. Those childhood links provide companionship, support, affection. They meet intimacy needs for both parents and adult children across the decades. We see this in those boomerang children rates we mentioned.
But what if that blood connection is toxic?
Well, the sources are careful to point out the dark side. Family closeness can be destructive. Some adults wisely choose to keep their distance from blood relatives when the relationship is chronically toxic or unsupportive. Choosing isolation from a harmful family dynamic could be an act of self-preservation, not failure.
So if your blood family is unavailable or unhealthy, where do you turn to satisfy that innate need for kin?
You turn to fictive kin. This is a profound concept. Fictive kin are people who are accepted as part of a family even though there's no blood or legal relation.
So a lifelong friend who becomes an aunt or uncle to your kids.
Exactly. Or members of a deeply bonded community like a spiritual group or a volunteer organization who fulfill those roles of support and acceptance that blood relatives are supposed to provide. The message is powerful. Adults need kin, fictive or otherwise, to keep that social convoy moving successfully.
All right, so having navigated intimacy, we turn to Erikson's second great adult challenge, generativity versus stagnation. This is the phase of productivity when adults seek to be productive in a caring way.
To ensure the world is better off for their having been in it.
It's about legacy, but not necessarily a grand historical legacy. It's about contribution in everyday life. And unlike intimacy, generativity expresses itself through multiple avenues.
Exactly. The source material identifies three primary avenues: creativity, caregiving, and employment.
Okay, let's start with caregiving. Generativity's most traditional manifestation is establishing and guiding the next generation, so biological parenting.
Parenting is arguably the most transformative experience of adulthood. And while it's inherently fulfilling, the research is clear. It is profoundly stressful, especially if the adult is still working through their own needs for intimacy or identity. Parenting immediately reorders your perspective from self-focus to child-focus.
And the adaptation is constant, right? You never really master it.
Never. It requires major adjustments every time a child hits a new developmental stage. The way you support a teenager is entirely different from how you support a toddler. This constant adaptation is a major source of adult growth.
And despite decades of social progress, the gender division of labor in caregiving, it's still pretty persistent.
It is. While we have seen increased involvement from fathers, the burden of being the primary kingkeeper, the person who maintains the emotional and logistical continuity of the family, still heavily falls on female partners. This was acutely visible during the COVID pandemic.
How so?
In every nation, female partners were more likely to curtail their employment to care for children. It highlights this deep societal default to the mother as the primary caregiver.
Moving beyond biological children, the generativity impulse gets really complex when we look at caring for non-biological children, adoption, step-parenting, foster care. Let's start with adoption.
Adoption presents very unique dynamics. For adoptive parents, the advantages are strong. They're legally connected for life. Biological parents are usually absent, and they wanted a child with this tremendous intensity. So strong, secure bonds form, especially with infants.
But that bond can be severely tested, often during adolescence.
It can. The emotional bond, while strong, might stretch during that identity formation phase, sometimes leading to intense rebellion centered on issues of origin, and the complexities are significant. If the child is of a different racial or cultural background, the parents have to engage in active racial socialization to prepare the child for the world.
And the research also points to some specific, severe clinical challenges that can pop up.
Yes, the source material mentions the DSM-5 diagnosis, reactive attachment disorder, or RAD. This is a severe disorder from profound early neglect or repeated changes in caregivers, leading to a failure to seek or respond to comfort. For the parent, this profound lack of reciprocal connection makes the generativity challenge just immensely draining.
That makes the task exponentially more difficult. Then we have step-parenting.
Step-parenting introduces disruption. The average age of new stepchildren is about 9 years old, which is right when kids are transitioning from dependency to early independence, so introducing a new authority figure is inherently challenging.
And the research suggests the disruption has cumulative effects.
It does. The effects are often observed over time. Young stepchildren might show physical or behavioral symptoms. They might get sick or become disruptive. Teenage stepchildren, however, are often shown to have higher rates of risk-taking behaviors, getting pregnant, drunk, arrested.
And that's not necessarily the step-parents' fault?
Not at all. It's more a manifestation of the cumulative familial disruption that the new family structure inherits.
Finally, we come to the most demanding expression of caregiving: foster parents. The research actually labels this the most difficult form of parenting. Why is that?
Because it requires this continuous, significant expenditure of psychosocial and financial resources for a temporary, often high-risk placement. There are over 400,000 children in U.S. foster care. Most stay for less than a year, but they're typically attached to their biological families, which creates split loyalties.
And the trauma background is the immense hurdle.
Precisely. Most foster children have experienced profound maltreatment, witnessed violence, and, as a defense mechanism, are deeply suspicious of adults. They come into the home with complex psychological needs. Successfully achieving generativity here means not just providing a safe home, but actively working to heal deep-seated emotional wounds, which is extraordinarily challenging.
There is a crucial support mechanism within the foster system family.
That's kinship care. About a third of foster children are placed with grandparents or other relatives. While this keeps the child out of a strange home, it places a massive burden on the relative, who may be older, financially constrained, or dealing with the very issues that led to the placement in the first place.
And that brings us to the role of grandparenting, which typically begins around age 50 and presents this whole new opportunity for generativity.
It's a profound shift. While many grandparents enjoy a loving, optional relationship, a smaller, critical percentage takes on a caregiver role. Grandparents provide total care in about 5% of cases. These are often skipped generation families, where the middle generation is absent.
So the grandparents are raising a second cohort of children entirely.
Entirely. And the person often coordinating this whole complex web of family care, whether for children or older relatives, is the kingkeeper.
The unsung hero of generativity.
Absolutely. This is the crucial caregiver, often a woman who maintains communication, gathers the family, conveys news, manages conflicts, and fosters generativity in others. They are the emotional and logistical infrastructure of the social convoy.
We often hear about the middle-aged adult as the sandwich generation, squeezed between the needs of their kids and their aging parents. Is this universal burden really reflected in the data?
It's an incredibly persistent myth, but the data does not support the image of the universally stressed, perpetually burdened middle-ager. The reality check is this: most adults are not heavily burdened by these simultaneous obligations.
Why does the myth persist then?
It persists because when caregiving demands are high, they are extremely difficult and very high profile, which leads to dramatic stories. However, many adults either genuinely enjoy fulfilling these roles, they find intense generativity in them, or they strategically choose to take on only some or none of these obligations. The choice and enjoyment element prevents that squeezed feeling for the majority.
Okay, so if caregiving is the familial expression of generativity, employment is the social and productive one. The sources say that work is the other major avenue for generativity. Why does it satisfy so many needs beyond just a paycheck?
Because work allows the adult to externalize their competence and contribute directly to society. It meets generativity needs by letting us develop skills, express creativity, mentor coworkers, and of course, support our family's health and education. It's the main way we contribute goods and services to the wider community.
And when you look at job satisfaction, the sources distinguish between two types of rewards.
We talk about extrinsic versus intrinsic rewards. Extrinsic rewards are tangible. Your salary, health insurance, bonuses, they're external. Intrinsic rewards are the intangible gratifications from the work itself. Job satisfaction, self-esteem, pride in your craft, that feeling of having contributed something valuable.
And it seems intuitive that intrinsic rewards would be more powerful drivers of long-term satisfaction. Is that true even when it comes to wages?
Absolutely. The research suggests that absolute income matters less for job satisfaction than comparison to comparable professions. If you feel you're being treated fairly and paid commensurately with your peers, you'll be more satisfied than someone earning a high wage but feeling severely undervalued. Equity and fairness are key intrinsic drivers.
Now, what happens when that crucial avenue of generativity is just shut down? What's the cost of unemployment?
It's devastatingly high. Unemployment is destructive to both physical and mental health. The core mechanism of harm is the massive reduction in self-esteem and the loss of routine. This loss of self-worth is associated with higher rates of child abuse, alcohol use disorder, and severe depression. The psychosocial impact is often more severe than the financial impact.
And this destructive effect can be seen across a whole generation if they fail to enter the workforce successfully early on.
That's the warning about neat emerging adults,
Yeah.
those not in education, employment, or training. If a significant part of a cohort misses that crucial window for developing workplace skills and building networks, this can create a lifelong detrimental impact on that entire generation's earning potential and well-being. It's a generational crisis of stagnation.
Which sets up a huge problem when we look at modern work realities. We are so far from the traditional lifelong 9-to-5 career path.
That sense of stability is largely gone for many. Today, only half of all U.S. workers have traditional, steady jobs with full benefits. The other half are navigating contract work, gig economy roles, part-time jobs, often without medical or pension benefits. And while that freedom might feel manageable at 25, the sources warn it can become disastrous by age 60.
It eliminates their safety net just when they're most vulnerable.
Precisely. And beyond the job structure, changes in location and schedule can actively undermine an adult's ability to achieve intimacy and generativity.
How so?
Changing locations, driven by a career move, is a high cost. It often severs work friendships and social support structures. So you sacrifice intimacy, losing crucial friends from your social convoy for the sake of generativity, creating an unhealthy imbalance.
And for senior workers, job loss or mandatory relocation carries even bigger consequences.
Significantly greater. It can mean the permanent loss of accrued benefits, decreased opportunity due to new skill requirements, and the very real threat of age discrimination. These losses aren't just financial. They represent a deep reduction in both intimacy and generativity.
And finally, let's talk about the tyranny of the schedule itself.
Increasingly, employers require non-standard or varying schedules, driven by the 247 service economy. A third of all workers have non-standard schedules. This disruption is deeply problematic. It disrupts biological rhythms, interferes with family life, and correlates strongly with personal and relational difficulties.
What's the most effective solution noted in the research to mitigate that disruption?
Flex time arrangements. These allow employees the flexibility to balance occupational and personal responsibilities. The research is clear. The ideal balance for modern workers isn't just adequate income, but also chosen schedules, the autonomy to decide when you work, and robust social support. That sense of control is essential for preventing stagnation.
We have covered a huge, complex landscape today. We've explored the structural paths from Erikson and Maslow, the internal wiring from the Big Five, and the external work of the self through intimacy and generativity.
And the synthesis reveals a fundamental truth. Adulthood is not about becoming some fixed statue of maturity, but about constantly adapting the external world to our internal blueprint.
Which means the ultimate expression of personality isn't just measured in a test, it's lived out through our deliberate choices.
Exactly. Adults choose their mates, their locations, their vocations, primarily to express their underlying personality. An extrovert will seek out high-stimulation jobs and surround themselves with social activities. An introvert will choose a quieter, no less rewarding life that prioritizes deep focus. Both are successful expressions of their core traits.
But regardless of where you fall on the ocean scale, the core psychological needs for connection and contribution, they remain universal.
They do. Every adult benefits from reliable friends and family in their convoy, from caregiving responsibilities, even if that's mentoring a colleague, and from work that provides satisfying intrinsic rewards. Intimacy and generativity are not optional. They are the fundamental, lifelong work of adulthood.
So let's end on a final provocative thought for you to explore on your own. We've discussed the increasing rates of boomerang children, cohabitation, and non-traditional work. If the traditional stage theories were built on a model of stable early marriage and a sequential career, what does the fluidity of modern life suggest about the future meaning of stagnation in generativity versus stagnation?
That is the essential challenge of our time. If life is no longer linear, if we are constantly forced to cycle back to identity, and if career paths frequently collapse or shift, perhaps the failure to contribute is less about individual laziness and more about an inability to rapidly pivot.
So is the failure to adapt, rather than the failure to contribute, the real definition of stagnation? Is flexibility itself the key trait for success in the 21st century convoy?
It forces us to ask if we need to expand our definition of successful generativity to include resilience, adaptation, and the sheer ability to survive in environments that are increasingly volatile. Something to think about.
We'll leave that challenge with you. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the structure of adult life. We'll see you next time.